Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing great out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day and a great beginning to your new weekend out there so far. There is much to get into in this morning's video, and the first thing we'll discuss is the tropics. There's some chatter out there about the potential for a tropical wave that could come off Africa, get over the Atlantic. Once it does, it'll have a shot to develop. If it does develop, will it threaten anybody? So we'll go over all model guidance and get very detailed for you folks and discuss that. And then we'll speak on a little bit closer to home, something that we call homegrown activity could get going, and I'll speak on what homegrown activity means as we get into that portion of the video. And then we'll talk about today's weather, and then stay tuned for the very end if you want to join us for a Bible devotion. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So let's make sure this is going to work for us. There's not a whole lot to point to out here. I'm not even going to draw on it on this area. Kind of a disturbance that cruised across the northern Gulf has now went into Texas and the portions of Louisiana. It continues to pop off, convection. Anytime I say convection, guys, I mean shower and storm activity. And it will do so again this afternoon, but it never developed. It was never even an invest. It certainly wasn't a named storm. And by the way, the next named storm still is Dexter, the D name. So obviously that's not going to take that name. Just a lot of activity over Central America, areas of Mexico. And, I do want to mention, I like to mention this in every video about the tropics. You see the, splashes of color on your screen like this right here, this over here. The orange, the reds, the blacks. This indicates colder cloud tops, which means we have deeper convection. Stronger updrafts mean taller updrafts normally, and the taller up it gets, the colder it gets in the atmosphere. And this is indicated by these colors you see on your screen. Here's a weak tropical disturbance here, not really a cyclone or anything like that. This is the remnants of what we call Invest 94L. It is still trying to survive out here, continues to pop off, convection as it gets closer to the Caribbean and the Lesser Antilles. It'll probably bring some unsettled weather into this area. We'll continue this morning into the next 24, 36, 48 hours or so. So enough of all that. The main area we're going to be talking about, at least the beginning of this update on the tropics, is way out here in what we call the Tropical Atlantic, or the MDR. Stands for Main Development Region. Normally an area that I just circled that typically does not get active until August, September. But, we're in late July. We're starting to see signs on model guidance that things are slowly waking up. So we're already watching a tropical wave that doesn't really show up on your screen here. You can see a part of it here over Africa. This will, move over to the Atlantic, have a shot to develop. So as we get into the next several days, really early next week, we'll begin to actually, circle this a lot more, and then we'll make its track. I think regardless, we're going to get a tropical wave. Just because we have a tropical wave, that doesn't mean we have a tropical cyclone, right? So this will have a shot to develop, just like any tropical wave does. And if it does, it'll, move maybe this way, or, maybe that way, or something like that. And then, of course, the closer it gets to landmass, the more we need to watch it for a threat. So, yeah, I just want to kind of show you all the pieces out there in the Atlantic, but there's not a lot to circle out there right at this second. So the latest from the National Hurricane Center, let's see if we got an update from this, because we are really close to, oh, yep, we got the latest update, but still nothing has changed. This is literally dropped about 15 minutes ago. Tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 7 days. So it's not that the National Hurricane Center doesn't see what we see, right? They're just saying that they don't think whatever this is going to be, if there is anything at all, they don't think it's going to develop sometime in the next 7 days. And when I say develop, I mean develop into a tropical depression or a named storm, just basically a system with a defined low-level circulation. So moving past that, let's look at model guidance. So this is this from overnight. It's the latest Euro, and we'll cruise through this pretty fast. We'll start off for Tuesday morning of next week, July the 29th. And what you're going to see down here is just blobs of green, splashes of yellow and red. This is our tropical wave. You're going to see it pop off an L every once in a while. This means it's, just a low pressure out here. But you'll notice it's not a very strong one. It kind of goes back and forth to a 1010 millibar low, 1014, which, by the way, is a very weak low pressure. The lower that low pressure number goes, the millibar number goes, the stronger the storm system. So we continue to move, and it actually weakens significantly. As we get, not significantly, I would say a good bit, enough to where it doesn't show up as much on your screen as we get into later next work week, into the morning of the 1st of August. But we still got this wave, and we're still watching it. It's just struggling. And it might get completely wiped out. dried out, sheared apart. There is some more, tropical energy behind this way out here in the Atlantic. But there it goes. And it doesn't look like much. It's bringing a lot of unsettled weather to the Caribbean islands. And, it doesn't show a whole lot of anything. Even if I was to keep this going and show a little bit, I might as well. There's no point in not to. If I showed it a little bit closer to, more landmass, the Caribbean islands and the southeast and stuff like that, that is our wave. Well, actually, let's back it up. It's kind of hard to see it. That is our tropical wave. In fact, if we pulled up probably the lower level VORT map, we probably could see it better. But, it really just blends in with a bunch of other tropical moisture. A lot of moisture dropped down from a cold front. It's hard to see it. So the GFS, what does it show? Anything this morning? Kind of same thing as the Euro. It just shows a weak low pressure. It's hard to even see. And you're like, Mitch, man, where is it? It's right here. So it doesn't look like much at all. And we continue, but sort of, I would say the origins, the remnants of whatever this tropical wave or feature is still there, but you can barely see it. And if we flip it to this, it's right here. And this is for the evening of August the 2nd. And I think we still need to watch it. I just think that, in my opinion, I think once it gets to the central to the eastern Atlantic, central to western Atlantic, the conditions won't be as favorable. Once it gets into what we call, and I know it's hard because of directional, it doesn't make sense, but we call this area the Southwest Atlantic right here. And the waters out here are warmer than average. Big plume, large, huge plume of warmer sea surface temperatures well into the 80s. And I do think there's a chance that shear could lighten up. But we got to watch this area. If this thing can survive the tropical Atlantic, and if this can sneak into this area, which it really doesn't survive, I think it will have a shot. And I'm going to show you a better example of that when we show you the Euro ensemble here in a second. But there's nothing to really show you here. Now, here's the Euro ensemble. This is what I mean. So we start this off around, let's just call it next Thursday morning. All right, really overnight, Wednesday into Thursday. All right, you see a lot of L's on your screen. We call this the EPS. The EPS makes up 51 members. So if any sort of decent low pressure forms out here, it's going to reflect that by putting an L on your screen. Even if it's like just a 10-15 millibar low, which by the way is a weak low pressure, it's going to throw an L on your screen. If it's very, very weak, it's probably not even going to reflect on here. So you see a bunch of L's jumbled up together. So this tells us, hey, there's a tropical wave out here more than likely. And they kind of are really tight up, really tight together, hanging out together. And then it still remains pretty intact, right? As far as where this tropical wave might or might not go. And I say might not because if there's even a tropical wave here or tropical depression, but this is about a week from today, we got some signal right here for a tropical system. And then watch as we continue to move forward here, there's a spread. Some members, try to stay in the Caribbean, but a lot of them, whatever members there is still, a lot of them begin to turn. But you'll notice is you see the blues right here and the light blues. This indicates, if you look right here, weaker low pressure, and this is going off winds. So this is kind of symbolizing it off winds here. So weaker low pressure. And if we continue to go forward here and we look right here, the ones that kind of turn and can survive and get into the Southwest Atlantic, we have some stronger members, like a 985. that's a tropical storm, low-end hurricane. So some stronger members in here. You got one member that, is a tropical storm hitting, Hispaniola, things like that. But, this continues, guys. And some of these members get very strong, try to threaten the Bahamas. So, this is getting past day 7. It's a very unreliable, time frame. And it is very far out. I would agree for people who are like critiquing the fact that I'm showing you long-range model guidance. Like, dude, what's the point of getting so detailed? And I would agree, but I can't help myself. I get detailed on everything, guys. Anybody that's been tuning in for any length of the time on my video know that I just can't help myself. But the latest from the chances of this tropical wave becoming a tropical depression here, if we look at this area out here, this kind of orange color, that's around the 60, 70, 80% chance of a tropical depression forming out here in the central Atlantic. Maintaining tropical depression state, or, once this gets into this area, it lessens. And it does make sense. I'm telling you, I don't like the environment, and model guidance obviously doesn't either. Once it gets kind of into this area right here, it's like, I think model guidance is really picking up on a high amount of shear. And, once it gains latitude, it's going to fight dry air. There's still a lot of dry air out here. And that's one thing I haven't mentioned a lot and I mentioned it a lot in last night's video. There's a lot of dry air still out here in the Atlantic Basin, which is really creating a stable environment. Stable environment doesn't allow for a strengthening tropical system, or really even the forming of a tropical system. So, enough about that. We will look a little bit closer to home. We're going to start this off for 12Z Thursday, July the 31st, Zulu time for Thursday morning. And I'm going to go through this pretty quick because there's no point in getting super detailed about each blob of moisture you see on your screen. But what you're going to do is what you're going to see is as I push this through, you're going to see blobs of green and yellow and red and orange. Okay, just think of that as just moisture, and it is what it is. It's just thunderstorm activity. So as we get into next Thursday, you're seeing a lot of thunderstorm activity over the southeast. We get into Friday, same thing, not as much, but we get into next Saturday, a week from today. You're seeing a lot of moisture off the coast of the Carolinas, on land over the southeast, and this is a lot of energy dropping down. And the pattern, and I'm actually probably gonna make another video on this just to talk about this. There's a big cool down on the way for the eastern U.S. A lot of troughing, a lot of storm systems are gonna kind of sink down along with the frontal boundary. And these frontal boundaries this time of the year, they don't sweep in and sweep out. A lot of times they'll stall out and then they'll lift. Because it's early August at this point, and we don't get any cold fronts to really just dive really far south, sweep in, sweep out. They kind of dive in, barely sink south enough, stall for a day or so, and then they kind of lift out. They don't just clear and bring the true core, cooler air mass behind these cold fronts. That stays further up in latitude. So in this case, we just get a lot of tropical moisture. We just get moisture in general that hangs out, especially from day 7 onward. So what am I trying to say here? Well, some of this moisture can, stall out off the coast of the southeast or over the northern Gulf and tap into some of those warmer sea surface temperatures and develop some sort of tropical characteristics, and we get homegrown activity. You call it homegrown activity because it comes from the homeland, the lower 48 over land, then it dips over the ocean. So, you don't see much of anything on this. It's not like you see just an all-out tropical system, but I do think a better way to look at this is the lower level vort here. And you can just see as I put this in motion, we get past day 7, a lot of energy trying to rotate around here. We got some energy in the Carolinas, off the coast of the Carolinas over Georgia, and just a lot of energy just dancing around here. If some of this energy can sink south enough over the Gulf or off the coast of the eastern U.S., it could absolutely develop into a tropical system. Now, whether it does like what this is showing, and it develops into a low pressure, and then it just doesn't bother anybody and it heads way out in the Atlantic, or if it kind of develops down here in the Gulf and then moves north and hits somebody, we're not sure. Either way, it's not a forecast, but what's wild to me is you can see this pretty well right here. You got several members trying to form some sort of a low pressure off the coast of the eastern U.S., from a lot of energy that just kind of flows over the United States. But that's the update on the tropics. Let's talk about today's weather. So right now we do have a lot of moisture cruising over areas of the Midwest. We got flash flood warnings ongoing right now across areas of Missouri into Iowa and Illinois. We got a little bit of moisture across the Ohio Valley, including the state of Ohio. We got a big surge of shower and storm action going across Minnesota. You guys have been hit a lot lately. And then we just got a lot of moisture down here sort of swinging around. I wouldn't say a lot, but it could become a lot later on today. This was the remnants. Well, this is the leftovers of sort of that disturbance we were watching that swung around high pressure. Now it's trapped south of high pressure, and it's just, hanging out down here. A little bit of moisture going over the Rockies, but yeah, outside of that, not a whole lot going on to really talk about as far as current conditions. Now, the heat is going to stink today, guys. It really is. And we got heat alerts scattered everywhere. We got heat advisories in the orange areas, counties, parishes. If you live in Louisiana, we got excessive heat watches in that burgundy color. And then that purple color, I would say more of this color. This color is different than this, by the way. This is red flag warnings. This more darker shade of pink, or if you want to call it purple, is extreme heat warnings. And by the way, the burgundy is extreme heat watches. I keep wanting to say excessive heat watches. That's what it used to be. Same thing, guys. I mean, it's going to get hot. But there is some flood watches kind of splashing in here too. There's been a big argument. It's wild on social media this week about heat, and it's like people have been getting offended talking about how hot it's going to get. Nobody wants, and like I said, I really think it's driven off politics. But I'm not going to get deep into this. But I always like to go off on a side story. People are just really upset about meteorologists, and heck, you even saw in the comments a couple days ago under my video about talking about a heat wave for the South. I guess nobody wants to call it a heat wave, even if we shatter the record high temperature for 5 or 6 days in a week in a row, like we could potentially do for areas of the Southeast. Everybody's just saying this is just summer, this is just August, this is just July. And, you are correct in saying that we do get a heat wave every summer, sometimes multiple heat waves where it gets well over 100 degrees for areas of the South. But guys, if we start to break records, we're breaking records. It's hot. So, I'll leave it at that. Don't want to get too off on that, but it is pretty wild how just people get offended by such odd things. And I don't know. Just the older I get, the more odd people seem to be to me. But, people probably think I'm odd and weird too. So I'll always remember that. But anyways, enough of that. It's going to be hot today, and I'm not going to get too deep into this. Just did anyways, but it's going to be hot. It's going to be hot. So I'm actually going to go mow my grass right after this. And it's already, about 82 degrees at my house here before 8 o'clock. So anyways, the risk of storms for today, we have a marginal risk stretching across the Midwest into the Mid-Atlantic. So just a level 1 out of 5 risk of severe weather. We do have a slight risk across areas of the Dakotas and a little portion of Minnesota. So we'll speak on this also. But, the tornado risk, there is a 2% risk up here in the Dakotas and areas of Minnesota. And then the wind threat, 15% risk of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour. And then the hail threat, sub 15%. But, of course, any storm that hits severe limits could produce hail. But the risk of flash flooding, we'll watch out for our folks here in Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Missouri. We have ongoing flash flood warnings right now across some of these states. And an area in PA that does sink down into areas of West Virginia and Maryland. You guys have a 15% risk of flash flood guidance being exceeded within 25 miles on a given location. The Southeast today, it's just going to be hot. The difference between this heat wave coming up and maybe the last two that we've had, I think we've had around 2 outside the one that's really starting today, is we're not going to have a lot of shower and storm activity to cool us down in the evenings. That's what we had with the last 2, really, really hot stretch of days. This, you're not going to have it as much. So it is going to feel hotter because you don't have the storms firing up in the afternoon. So that's what's unfortunate. But, we get into this afternoon, some pop-up downpours in North Carolina, maybe Tennessee, Kentucky, but not I would say 80% of people are not going to get a drop of rain from this. But a little bit more flow because we do have that little disturbance down here in the northern Gulf for the southern areas of Mississippi. A little bit of downpour activity for southern Alabama. But as you notice, there's no real point in zooming in anybody here in the Southeast. It's just, you're just being dominated by high pressure. It's going to be hot and humid with not a lot of flow to kick up these storms and to get going to cool anybody off. But the Northeast today, the New England area, is certainly pretty calm today. Once you get into PA, you could definitely start to see some storm activity. You see this cluster of storms here down to Maryland. We're getting thunderstorms firing up in West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio. And we definitely have more flow up here because we're more to the upper portion of this ridge where the flow is just more enhanced. So we're going to get these rounds of thunderstorms going across these areas. I would not be surprised if some of these regions get an upgrade from a marginal to a slight risk because, let's back this up a little bit. This is for later this evening. We do have a pretty well put together line of storms going across PA, across areas of Ohio. And speaking of Ohio, let's go on and zoom in. It is worth zooming into here. We get into 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 7 o'clock. You see those thunderstorms around Bowling Green. Storms possible near Columbus, and then we take it until later in the evening. It looks very stormy up here in northern Ohio. Cleveland, watch out for some storms later this evening. And, we get into the overnight hours, and even more storms could continue to move into Toledo, Bowling Green, but nothing too crazy. I think just normal summer type stuff, to be honest with you. But 4, 5 p.m., you see these big storms near Harrisburg. Beware of that. Hot, humid conditions will get these things going, will feed the environment out ahead. And then we get into 9, 10. You see the storms up here near northern PA. St. Mary's getting hit. These could get all the way down to Pittsburgh. And just got to watch out for this line of storms. This is midnight tonight, State College, Williamsport. And this eventually gets into eastern PA after midnight tonight. It still has these storms hanging tight. I mean, Allentown, Lancaster, you guys are getting hit. Scranton, storms sneak down to Hagerstown, Maryland. And just can continue to just get rounds of rain here. Flash flooding is possible in this area too with that 15% risk in place. The south central U.S., just tropical downpours in Louisiana. The Texas coastline, deep down in South Texas, you guys could get it too. We already mentioned southern Mississippi. Some storms could sneak into the southern half of Arkansas also, and then lose the daytime heat and get into the overnight hours and things calm down, but not a whole lot to really get detailed on there. The north central U.S., we're going to get an area of storms that redevelops here in northern Illinois. We'll get some thunderstorm activity in central lower Michigan. And then we get into this afternoon. You see a lot of thunderstorm activity for Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, lower Michigan. Maybe some storms up here in northeast Minnesota too. And then we see a more intense complex of storms cruising through the heart of the Dakotas, which is why you have that slight risk. So let's go on and zoom into a couple of these areas. Indiana, Illinois here. We get it to about midday. You see those storms north of Peoria. Storms will probably move into the Chicago area around early afternoon. And then we'll just get pop-up action south of Indianapolis, maybe right on top of Indianapolis, Fort Wayne. Anybody can get it. It doesn't look as widespread and covered for like southern areas of Illinois, but St. Louis up to Quincy, some storms, Springfield, some storms possible. And then we get into 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10, 11, midnight. And could continue just to get some storms up here in northern Indiana. And I know I don't have lower Michigan pulled up, but just be aware of some storms there too. So that's weird. Up here in the Dakotas, just had an extra tab pulled up by accident. Really, this area of storms doesn't really get going until after the sun goes down up here. So, I mean, this is like around close to midnight. We got this cluster of storms that really gets going as it gets into the northern half of South Dakota and then southern North Dakota. Very intense line of storms cruises through this area. There will be a tornado threat with this, damaging wind threat. And eventually after midnight, it'll start to slam northern areas of Minnesota. You guys have been getting hit hard in western northern Minnesota lately. And then this will track on into northeast Minnesota by tomorrow morning and then get into Canada where it looks to weaken. Now the western U.S., folks, there ain't a whole lot to talk about out here. I just want to thank anybody that continues to tune in for the western U.S. They're just... The summer and late spring, there really is just not a lot to speak on out here. Winter is probably definitely a bigger topic up here. Fall and the winter when you get the changing of the seasons and the dippings of the jet stream, if you will. But some showers are possible from, western Nevada into Oregon, into Idaho, into Montana as it rounds over a ridge. We're just saying a whole lot to talk about. Temperatures, I mean, it is hot, guys. Southeast, just be careful, be safe out there. Don't stay out too long. This is the kind of heat they'll sneak up on you. I don't know how, because when you walk right outside, it smacks you in the face. But you're outside and it's just hot, guys. So not as bad in the Northeast. And you look at these temperatures and you might think, well, this don't look too bad, but the heat index is much higher. So just be aware of that. And listen, this isn't even the hottest day. It's going to be even hotter in the next few days. So just take the precaution needed, hot and humid. And then you look out for the western half of the lower 48. And very hot through the middle of the country, upper 90s, low 100s. So, I mean, it's going to get into the hundreds, even up into South Dakota. And in the western U.S., just kind of normal run-of-the-mill temperature. So, hey, tonight I'm thinking about just doing a video about a cool down on the way. I think that'll interest people a lot more than a heat wave. So, man, model guides are really locking into a cool down for a lot of the eastern U.S. Now, for some people, that could just mean a lot of unsettled weather, just clouds and storms kind of keeping the temperatures down. But I might do a video, an evening video for tonight or tomorrow night discussing this cool down. And, I for one, will enjoy talking about that a lot more than the heat. Trust me, I understand as a viewer, really, it's hard to just hear about heat. It stinks and nobody... I mean, it is summer, it gets hot, so I totally get it. But we can talk about some cooler air as we get into August, so we'll do that. But enough of all that. Let's give you guys an update. Let's just use this. I like that. Let's give you guys a Bible devotion. So this is a long one this morning, and I actually did this. I put this together yesterday morning, but remember my internet was out, and I'm still having issues with my internet. In fact, my stuff in there is flashing red like I don't even have internet, but I do. So it's kind of weird. Anyways, I'll get that fixed. Not the end of the world. First world problems, right? So this morning we are in 2 Peter chapter 1, and I'm going to start with verse 3, and I'm just going to read until I stop. So it says, His divine power has given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. By these he has given us very great and precious promises, so that through them you may share in the divine nature, escaping the corruption that is in the world because of evil desire. For this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with goodness, goodness with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with endurance, endurance with godliness, godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being useless or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. The person who lacks these things is blind and short-sighted and has forgotten the cleansing from his past sins. Therefore, brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election, because if you do, these things you will never stumble. So that was verse 3 through 10, 2 Peter's chapter 1. So I wrote a couple things down as always, and we'll speak on it a little bit. And I just put constantly seek to strengthen your faith, strengthen your relationship with God. Scripture mentions confirming your calling. And I'm big on this, guys. This is huge. If you don't know your calling, you should make every effort to find out what it is. If you know what it is deep down, then are you following it? So I've always said this, there's like a two-step process to really allowing God to utilize His gifts He's given you. One is figuring out what your gift is. What is your calling gift? And you can kind of combine both together, right? Do you know what it is? And a lot of times I like to say it like this: it's the thing that you're the best at with the littlest amount of effort. And one of my gifts is talking about the weather, but I also love, motivational stuff too. I love encouraging people. I love lifting up others, and but obviously the weather, speaking weather on my YouTube is a huge platform for me to glorify God. So that's why I strive to do that. But anyways, it's not all about me. But if you do know what it is deep down, then what's stopping you from pursuing it? Is it the fact that you don't want to get uncomfortable? You don't want to, because if you don't want to get uncomfortable, you're not going to be used, right? Strengthening the qualities mentioned in Scripture allows us to be used more by God. So you got to be open, right? You got to be open to being used. And guys, I know a lot of times it feels like we recycle some of the same stuff in the devotion, and everybody's going to pull a little bit something different out of Scripture. We don't want to get it twisted, right? But we got to be open to being used, and then we can be used in His timing. So the only I need to stop saying the only, but a way of doing this, because God can make a way through anyway, right? But a way of doing this is, constantly seeking Him in everything, the positives and the negatives in life, staying away from sin. You do that by staying in the Word, finding you a good church home, finding you good people, Christ-like people, doing things that make you uncomfortable, that know that is going to lead you in the direction that God wants you to go. So, that's pretty much all I got. I had a lot more to say yesterday, but kind of had to, I wanted to do the devotion yesterday, right? But I had to do it today because the internet went down. But hopefully that helps, and we'll try to have you another devotion tomorrow. But I appreciate y'all joining me. Appreciate the encouragement. I haven't been able to read the comments from the live I did the other day. So Do appreciate the kind words. I think I'm a couple days behind on comments. I'll get caught up with everything. Just it's been a crazy summer in the West household. It has, and I'll leave it at that. It's been kind of a lot of small blows that just have continued to keep coming. You don't get a break, and sometimes when the small kind of blows of life, if you can't come up and get some air, they add up after a while. So it has been just a rocky summer here in the West household, but at the end of the day, nothing crazy or significantly bad has happened. It just seems like a summer with, I use the word flow a lot in my weather videos. It's been a summer of just lack of flow. But listen, at the end of the day, I got my health. My girls are healthy. My wife is healthy. And we're blessed. We got a roof above our head. And I try to remember that. And it's definitely been a summer of perspective for me, where I've just understood that I'm blessed. So, I always try to throw some personal stuff in there, guys. But I love you guys. Appreciate y'all. I might have a video tonight talking about a cool down. I'm actually excited to discuss this, but if it's not tonight, I'll probably do it tomorrow night. But God bless. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon.